Look at these two aircraft. Place them side by side on your screen. Study the sleek, angular nose designed to slip through radar like a knife through silk. Notice the air intakes positioned along the fuselage to hide the engine and fan blades from enemy detection systems. Observe the internal weapons bays tucked beneath the belly, the canted vertical stabilizers angled outward at nearly identical degrees, the trapezoidal wings that seem to have been traced from the same blueprint. One of these machines is the F-35 Lightning II, America's crown jewel of military aviation, the most expensive weapons program in human history. $400 billion, 3 decades of research, the combined brilliance of thousands of the finest engineers this nation has ever produced. The other is the J-35, built by the People's Republic of China. They are nearly identical, and the reason they look so alike is not coincidence. It is not parallel development. It is not some remarkable convergence of engineering minds arriving at the same solution independently. The reason is 50 terabytes of classified data, stolen, distracted byte by byte from the most secure computer networks in the American defense industry, smuggled across the Pacific Ocean through fiber optic cables in the dead of night, while the men and women who built this technology slept peacefully in their beds, unaware that their life's work was bleeding out into enemy hands. 50 terabytes. To put that number in perspective, that is equivalent to 5 libraries of Congress. Every book, every document, every piece of knowledge contained in the largest library in the world multiplied by 5. That is how much was taken. And this is the story of how it happened. The story of the men and women who discovered the theft, who hunted the thieves across continents, and through cyberspace who spent nearly a decade piecing together one of the most sophisticated espionage operations ever conducted against the United States. But more than that, this is a story about what it means to protect the things we build, the things we create, the innovations that keep this nation safe and free. Because in the 21st century, the battlefield is no longer just the sky or the sea or the foreign desert. The battlefield is everywhere. It is in the networks that connect us, in the computers that hold our secrets, in the invisible rivers of data that flow beneath our daily lives. And on that battlefield, America has enemies who are patient, resourceful, and relentless. This is the story of how we discovered them and what we learned about the new kind of war they are waging against us. The year was 2007. The place was Fort Worth, Texas, inside the sprawling complex of Lockheed Martin's Aeronautics Division. This was the nerve center of the F-35 program, where the future of American air power was being assembled, piece by piece, circuit by circuit, algorithm by algorithm. Dr. James Thornton had worked in this building for 23 years. At 52 years old, with the gray streaking through his close-cropped hair and deep lines etched around his eyes from too many late nights staring at computer screens, he was one of the senior network engineers responsible for keeping the program's digital infrastructure secure. For Lockheed Martin, Thornton had served 12 years in the United States Navy. He understood discipline. He understood vigilance. He understood that the small details, the things most people overlooked, were often the things that mattered most. That understanding would prove to be the only thing standing between America's most advanced fighter jet and the foreign power determined to steal it. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when Thornton noticed the anomaly. He was not supposed to be awake. His wife had gone to bed hours ago, and his doctor had been warning him about the toll that chronic sleep deprivation was taking on his health. But something had pulled him from his fitful dreams that night. A nagging feeling he could not name. The kind of instinct that sailors develop after years at sea, the sense that something in the water has changed even when the surface appears calm. He had padded downstairs to his home office, opened his laptop, and logged into the remote monitoring system that allowed him to check on Lockheed Martin's network from home. What he saw made his blood run cold. Data was moving, flowing outward from the company's servers at a steady measured rate, not the erratic bursts you might expect from a system glitch or a scheduled backup. This was something else, something deliberate, something that moved with the patience and precision of a predator that knew exactly what it was hunting. The data stream was heading toward an IP address Thornton did not recognize. He ran a quick trace. The address bounced through 3 different countries before disappearing into a digital dead end somewhere in Eastern Asia. Thornton sat back in his chair, his heart pounding against his ribs like a fist against a locked door. He knew what this was. He had attended the classified briefings. He had read the intelligence reports about foreign actors probing American defense networks, testing for weaknesses, searching for ways inside. But reading about something and seeing it happen in real time were two very different experiences. Someone was inside the network, right now, at this very moment, and they were taking something. The question was what to do about it. Thornton's first instinct was to pick up the phone and call security, alert the incident response team, shut down the compromised servers, and lock the intruders out before they could take anything else. But even as his hand reached for the phone, his Navy training kicked in. If he cut the connection now, the intruders would know they had been discovered. They would vanish like ghosts, cover their tracks, and find another way back in. He would have stopped the immediate bleeding, but learned nothing about who was attacking or how they had gotten inside. There was another option, a riskier one. He could watch. He could monitor their movements, study their methods, and try to understand the full scope of what was happening before taking action. It was the kind of decision that could end a career if it went wrong. The kind of decision that required a man to trust his own judgment more than the standard protocols. Thornton lowered his hand from the phone. For the next several weeks he watched. He set up what security professionals call a honeypot, a trap designed to observe the intruders without alerting them to the fact that they were being observed. He tracked their movements through the network, noting which directories they accessed, which files they copied, which pathways they used to navigate through the system's defenses. What he discovered kept him awake at night. The intruders were not amateurs. They did not blunder around the network like common hackers looking for credit card numbers or personal information. These people moved with extraordinary care and precision. They would spend hours, sometimes days, simply mapping the architecture of the system before touching a single file. They knew exactly what they were looking for. And what they were looking for was everything. The radar design specifications for the F-35, including the number and types of modules used in the detection system. The engine schematics showing methods for cooling gases and treating the leading and trailing edges of the turbine blades. The aft deck heating contour maps. The flight testing data accumulated over years of development. The detailed specifications about the aircraft's stealth coating and radar cross-section characteristics. They were not stealing random pieces of information. They were systematically extracting the complete blueprint of America's most advanced stealth fighter. Night after night, Thornton would sit in the darkness of his home office, watching the data flow outward like blood from an open wound. He documented everything, saved every log file, built a comprehensive record of the intrusion. And with each passing night, he felt a growing sense of horror at the scale of what was happening. These people did not just have technical skills. They had knowledge. They knew which files contained the most valuable information. They knew which engineers had access to the most sensitive data. They knew the structure of the program in ways that should have been impossible for an outside attacker. It was as if someone had given them a map, someone who understood the program from the inside. That realization haunted Thornton more than anything else, because it meant that somewhere out there, someone with connections to the American aerospace industry was helping the enemy. Someone was identifying targets, providing guidance, curating the vast ocean of data to ensure that only the most valuable secrets were stolen. Who was that person? How had they avoided detection for so long? And how much had they already given away? Thornton did not have answers to those questions. Not yet. But 1,500 miles to the east in a different kind of office, someone else was asking the same questions. Someone who would spend the next 7 years searching for the truth. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and in 2007, she was 33 years old, a special agent assigned to the Cyber Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C. Mitchell had joined the FBI 6 years earlier after completing law school at Georgetown and spending 2 years working at a private firm that specialized in intellectual property litigation. The work had been lucrative but unsatisfying. She had not gone to law school to help corporations sue each other over patent disputes. She had gone because she believed in justice, in accountability, in the idea that people who broke the rules should face consequences. The FBI had given her a chance to put those beliefs into action. It was personal for her in ways she rarely discussed with colleagues. Her father had worked at a naval shipyard in Baltimore for 22 years before losing his job when the yard closed, unable to compete with foreign manufacturers who had access to cheaper labor, and she suspected stolen American industrial knowledge. He never fully recovered from that loss, and he died of a heart attack 3 years later at the age of 54. Mitchell carried that memory with her into every case she worked, a reminder that economic crimes and espionage were not abstract offenses, but attacks on real people who had devoted their lives to building something meaningful. And the cyber division had given her a front row seat to a new kind of crime, one that did not involve guns or masks or getaway cars, but keyboards and code and invisible intrusions that could steal more in a single night than any bank robber could take in a lifetime. On the wall of her small office hung a map of the United States. Red pins marked the locations of known cyber intrusions at defense contractors over the past 18 months. There were dozens of them scattered across the country like drops of blood on a white sheet. Lockheed Martin in Texas, Boeing in Washington State, Northrop Grumman in California, BAE Systems in New Hampshire, Raytheon in Massachusetts. Mitchell had been studying these intrusions for months, looking for patterns, searching for connections. And the more she looked, the more certain she became that she was not looking at a series of isolated incidents. She was looking at a campaign. All of these companies had one thing in common. They were all involved in the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program, the most expensive and technologically advanced weapons system ever developed. The program represented the cutting edge of American military capability, a stealth fighter designed to give U.S. pilots overwhelming advantages in any future conflict. And someone was systematically targeting it. These are not random attacks, Mitchell told her supervisor during a briefing that spring. Someone is hunting for specific information. They know exactly what they want and where to find it. This level of targeting requires inside knowledge. Her supervisor, a veteran agent named Mark Sullivan, who had spent 30 years in the Bureau and had the weary eyes to prove it, looked at her with an expression that mixed skepticism with something that might have been grudging respect. Inside knowledge, he repeated. You are suggesting we have a mole. I am suggesting we have something, Mitchell replied. Maybe a mole, maybe a network of assets, maybe something we have never seen before. But whoever is doing this, they are not operating blind. They have help. Sullivan leaned back in his chair and studied the map on the wall. And how do you propose we find them? Mitchell did not have an answer to that question. Not yet. The attackers were careful. They routed their intrusions through servers in multiple countries, making it nearly impossible to trace the attacks back to their origin. They used encryption and obfuscation techniques that were far more sophisticated than anything the Bureau had encountered from ordinary hackers. These were not ordinary hackers. These were professionals, and they had been doing this long enough to learn how to cover their tracks. We wait, Mitchell said finally. We watch. We gather intelligence. And eventually they will make a mistake. They always do. It was not the decisive answer Sullivan wanted to hear, but it was the truth. In counterintelligence, patience was not just a virtue, it was a necessity. You could not rush an investigation like this. You had to let it develop. Let the picture come into focus. Gradually, let the enemy reveal themselves through their own actions. Mitchell settled in for a long hunt. She did not know then that it would consume nearly a decade of her life. While the FBI watched and waited, the man at the center of the conspiracy continued his work undisturbed 3,000 miles away in the quiet suburbs of Vancouver, Canada. Michael Liang was 49 years old in 2007. He owned a small company called Load Aviation Technologies, which provided components and consulting services to the civilian aerospace industry. From the outside, he appeared to be exactly what his business cards claimed, a successful immigrant entrepreneur who had built a comfortable life in North America through hard work and technical expertise. He lived in a beautiful house overlooking Burrard Inlet with his wife Catherine and their 2 children. He drove a sensible car, attended community events, and was known among his neighbors as a quiet, polite man who kept his lawn meticulously trimmed and always remembered to wave hello. No one who saw him walking his dog in the morning or picking up groceries on the weekend would have guessed that this unremarkable middle-aged businessman was the linchpin of one of the most damaging espionage operations ever conducted against the United States. But then again, that was precisely the point. Michael Liang was not a spy in the traditional sense. He had never received training from any intelligence agency. He did not know how to pick a lock or conduct surveillance or any of the other skills that people associate with the world of espionage. What he did know was aviation. He had studied it in university, worked in the industry for decades, and built a network of contacts that stretched across North America, Europe, and Asia. He understood the technology. He understood the business. And most importantly, he understood who had access to what. That knowledge made him invaluable. Because the hackers in Shanghai who were breaking into American computer networks did not have the expertise to distinguish between valuable intelligence and routine paperwork. They could steal 100,000 files, but they had no way of knowing which ones mattered and which were worthless without someone to guide them. Michael Liang was that guide. He identified the targets. He researched which executives had access to which programs. He provided names, phone numbers, email addresses, and personal details that could be used to craft convincing phishing attacks. And when the hackers sent him lists of the files they had accessed, he reviewed them with expert eyes and told them exactly what to steal. He was not a hacker. He was something more dangerous. He was a curator of secrets. The question that haunted investigators for years was simple but essential. Why would a man who had built a successful life in North America, who had a family and a business, and every reason to be grateful for the opportunities this continent had given him, betray the country that had welcomed him? The answer lay in his past. Michael Liang was born in Shanghai in 1958 into a family with deep military roots. His father had been an officer in the Chinese Air Force, a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country and who had died in a training accident in 1975 when Michael was 17 years old. His mother, an aeronautical engineer, had raised him alone after that, and she had raised him with a particular kind of patriotism, one that was steeped in pride but also in shame. Pride in China's long history and cultural achievements. Shame at the technological gap that separated their nation from the West. You must understand, she used to tell him, America can see every one of our aircraft on their radar from hundreds of miles away. Their planes can fly into our airspace without us even knowing. That is a humiliation. Those words stayed with him through his education in Canada, where the Chinese government sent him in 1985 as one of a select group of promising students. Through his decision to stay in the West after the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989. Through his marriage, the birth of his children, the slow accumulation of the comfortable life that immigration had made possible. He did not return to China, but he never forgot his mother's words. In 2001, a man from the Chinese embassy in Ottawa approached him at a community event. The conversation was casual at first, just friendly questions about the aerospace industry, about trends in technology, about whether Liang might know anyone who worked for American defense contractors. The questions grew more specific over time. The requests grew more explicit. And in 2007, the offer came, "We need someone who can help us identify valuable information. You will be compensated appropriately." Michael Liang said yes. He said yes because of the money, which was substantial. But he also said yes because somewhere in the back of his mind, he could still hear his mother's voice. That is a humiliation. And so for 7 years, from 2007 to 2014, Michael Liang helped orchestrate the theft of 50 terabytes of classified data from the American defense industry. He identified targets. He provided intelligence on personnel and procedures. He translated technical documents from English to Chinese and wrote detailed reports explaining the significance of what had been stolen and how it could be applied to Chinese military programs. He called it standing on the shoulders of giants. Why spend decades and hundreds of billions of dollars developing technology from scratch when you could simply steal it and build upon the work others had already done? It was efficient. It was practical. And for 7 years, it worked perfectly until it did not. Because 3,000 miles away, Sarah Mitchell was watching.